they're making quite a thing about recycling now, and that's the thing to do. All right, my earliest recall of recycling was about 80 years ago down on Charleston Street. My dad had a recycling place. Now back then they didn't call it recycling. It was a junkyard. You know. Anyway, he bought scrap iron and metals and whatever and recycled them. And we lived right where at 34 and a half Charleston Street. And I moved back in there in 1970 for the next 25 years. And out back in that lot was the barn. And we almost had our first contact with the fire department then. In that barn, we had about a 1930 Jordan. That was our touring car. Now, we didn't do much touring, but anyway, we had a Jordan. All right, one day, they noticed the smoke coming from the Jordan. So, they didn't call the fire department right away. They went out, opened the car door. There's my sister, one of my older sisters, and the neighboring girl. They were in there smoking corn silk. And then came the flood of 37. We were out on the back porch and the water was in the backyard. And we kind of got thinking, well, maybe we'd better get out of here. And Mother had a Maytag washer. So the boys brought it up on the cellar landing. They figured, well, 5 or 6 foot ought to take care of it. And we butted the truck up next to the freight station so it wouldn't wash down the creek. And we went up on Fellows Avenue to Zippy Brambrilla and spent the night. Well, when we came back the next day, we didn't have any back porch. We didn't have any barn. All we had was a mess. Now, it seems like one thing that the electric company used to store their poles where they're parking their cars now between the creek and the back of the plant. All right, some of those poles washed down the creek. Now, I don't know how they made it through the railroad bridge, but when it got down to the Charleston Street Bridge, a couple of them went squashwise. And so below the bridge wasn't too bad. But this side of our side of the bridge, we had 14 inches of water in the first floor of that place. To give you an idea of what water was like then. All right, then later on in the 30s, Dad went up and bought, I think he bought it, where the Acorn Market starts. From there to the boarding company. And that was just one big shallow field. Anyway, he moved the junkyard up there. All right, we bought scrap steel, cast iron, brass, copper, aluminum, whatever, radiators, batteries, cardboard, newspaper, magazines, rags. We recycled almost everything. And we paid people good money to bring it in. And you didn't have to be a big dealer or anything. People would come in there with wheelbarrows, trunk of their cars, and we performed a service. And that's where I learned how to drive, I think. It was a sloping property on the Borden side. And we had a scale house in the middle, and there's a driveway all the way around it. Well, Dad scrounged up an old Model A. Wasn't licensed for the road, but it was good enough for me. I'd go just like the NASCAR, around and around. It's just going up, brake coming down and turning. And then they out with the shifting lever. This is standard shift, your regular H pattern, and it was on the shifting lever, or the steering column. And so Dad took me out one day, went out on the Morris Road, and wasn't a car in sight. So we swapped seats. I put it in first, and I feeling pretty confident. So then instead of going up in the second, I just rammed her right up in there, and I hit reverse. Boy, did we come to a screeching, noisy halt. Then, when I finally did take my driver's test, you had to go up Pearl Street and turn around the middle of the road. All right? It had snowed, and there's about a 3 or 4 foot bank on both sides, so that narrowed the road up. All right? That was towards the end of the war, and the car we were driving at the time was maybe a 38 Plymouth. And that's back when they had steel bumpers bolted onto the frame. All right, the bolts that fastened it to the frame are long gone, but it had tail lights were stuck on. It's like the headlights. They're not built in like they are today. They were sitting out there by themselves. And so the bumper was fastened on to the tail lights with a piece of rope. It wasn't functional, but, you know. Anyway, so I took my driver's test in that car. Well, when I backed up, it wasn't no snowbanks. And that bumper being what it was, we got back to the courthouse, and the trooper told Dad, he said, "You teach this guy how to back up." And Dad said, "Well, yes. You didn't do a very good job." And he gave me my test. Here's my license anyway. The old Route 6 went in front of the moose and the horseshoe down there. All right, there's that little piece of land in there. And there was a kind of a hill on one end and shallow on the other, because it was an extension of the cemetery hill going right down to the moose. And they just cut a path through there. So Dad had Andrew Yagi, who was a realtor, and Andy went down and bought that piece of ground. Because Dad knew if he wanted to buy it, they wouldn't sell it to him, just because he was a junk dealer. So anyway, he got Yagi to buy it. And then Yagi sold it to Dad. And we got Jerome Shablasky's dad and his brother with their bulldozer, and they leveled it off. And Dad put up a 60 by 110 foot building. And it was only 8 inches wide, the footer. And so he hired a guy to come in with one of those little putt-putt cement mixers. And you get a pile of gravel and sand and water and a wheelbarrow, and that's how it wasn't any ready mix. And the guy that was pouring the cement, he said, "John," he said, "it's never going to work." He said, "It's not thick enough. You know, it's not wide enough. It'll crack all the pieces." Dad says, "You let me worry about the cracks. All you do is worry about the pouring." Well, Dad had a ton of pipe, and that footer is laced with pipe. The guy poured a little concrete, Dad poured a little pipe. Concrete pipe, concrete pipe. Come to the corners, just bend the pipe, put it in there. As far as I know, there's never been a crack in that damn wall. And then when we put the roof on, I found out another thing. You think you have to have sun to get a sunburn. We were up putting the roofing on one day, and it was an overcast day, summertime. I took my shirt off. I was up there all day. boy, did I get a sunburn. I don't know how long it took me to